We thought we had seen it all, from mass murders, psychopaths, hooligans, and serial killers to even presidents. Cops have been on a roll arresting people of all types, but have seen cases where they arrest FBI agents. Were they rightly arrested? And do wrongful arrests of law enforcement officials call for the arrest with heavier punishments? Join us as we check a look at bizarre cases where dumb decisions from cops take them to rather odd position. So why don't we just kick things off with a crossover story of an FBI agent who has been wrongfully jailed? In our first case, the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department detained a former FBI agent for no apparent reason. It was a bizarre and ridiculous incident. As it turned out, Roger Golubski, a former detective, had been falsely accused of assaulting two black women between 1998 and 2002. There have been 2 accusations to be exact. The real question is, however, how did the Kansas City police force allow him to get away with it for so long? Roger Golubski's unsolved case was discovered by the FBI while it was looking into the Kansas City Police Department's behavior. The former detective had a history of sexually assaulting women over the course of his 35-year career as a police officer and had been trading drugs for information. Lamonte McIntyre, a young black man, was accused of committing a double homicide by Golubski during his time as a police officer. McIntyre was ultimately freed after serving 24 years in prison without proper cause as a result. Golubski was taken into custody by the FBI on suspicion of 6 counts of sexually assaulting 2 black women. He has since entered a not guilty plea. Despite the jury rejecting his lawyer's request for release on medical grounds, he was kept in custody for routine medical examination. Black woman Rhonda Tribute, whose corpse was discovered in 1998, was one of Golubski's informants. Her case remains unsolved despite the fact that the investigation was started but never finished. She died, and Golubski's involvement is now being called into question by many people. That is exactly what we are saying. Many civil rights advocates across the nation have praised the arrest of Golubski, but it also raises serious questions about police behavior and the abuse of their authority. According to Tricia Bullnell, the director of the Midwest Innocence Project, a full investigation into the abuses in Wyandotte County and systematic reforms are needed to ensure that no other police officers and public officials can continue to abuse their power. As more of Golubski's crimes were discovered, it became clear that the Kansas City Police Department needed significant restructuring. Several inquiries remain unanswered as a result of the FBI's inquiry into the department. Roger Golubski's arrest was long overdue, but it's worth noting that it was the FBI, not the Kansas City Police, who brought him to justice. Next up, with the arrest of 2 Drug Enforcement Administration officers by the FBI in Nassau County, Florida, the situation has unexpectedly turned around. The DEA, a law enforcement organization renowned for its aggressive efforts to combat the drug trade, has charged 2 officers with drug-related offenses, but the system's level of dysfunction clearly remains unclear. While selling drugs, including cocaine, that had been seized to willing customers, Sergeant James Hickox was captured with his hand in a cookie jar. His greed knew no bounds as he also combined drugs with other substances to make up the weight difference and kept parts for himself. In his bedroom closet, the FBI discovered 3 shoeboxes, each containing $100,000 in cash. They also discovered another $200,000 hidden in his garage. Hickox claimed that he borrowed the funds for his claim by partaking in his gambling habit when asked where the money came from. Hickox's actions have hurt the DEA's reputation and are obviously a breach of his obligations as a law enforcement officer. Joshua Erie, a highway inspector, had been covered in the same drugs that had to be seized, even going so far as to legally approve the prescription of 43 oxycodone pills. He purchased drugs from drug dealers. As if that weren't enough, while under the influence of drugs, he acquired a gun, due to the fact that he was trusted with the law rather than the law itself. Erie's actions were not only wrong, but also dangerous. The surprise arrest of these officers leaves the public wondering just how pervasive corruption is within law enforcement organizations. Sheriff Bill Leeper expressed his dissatisfaction by saying, "I think we need to make sure law enforcement personnel who violate the law are held accountable. When I learned of the accusations, I was shocked, let down, repulsed, and beyond angry. These incidents where the police ran into the FBI were some of the most shocking ones. We now look at our last and final case. A significant mishap that made headlines involved the case of mistaken identity between a Florida deputy and an FBI agent. When he received a call from a man claiming to be an FBI agent and asking to meet him in a nearby parking lot, Officer Gordon found himself in a precarious situation. This is a classic illustration of what can go wrong if a person doesn't confirm the identity of the person they're meeting, especially when speaking to a police officer. I do, but I don't understand what the problem is with your meeting me at the office. I'll talk to the U.S. Attorney's Office about it. Cut off the recording device now." "Okay, well, I will when I leave the area, sir." "Well, I will when I leave the area, sir." Asked the officer to turn off his recording device. Suspicions should have been aroused. However, Officer Gordon continued to record the conversation, a classic move. This was a wise decision as well, because it provided proof of what had happened, which, as you can probably guess, didn't turn out too well for Officer Gordon. Despite Agent Hatton's efforts to persuade Gordon that he was an FBI agent, the officer was skeptical and demanded to know how the agent obtained his phone number, given the predicament the officer was in. It is not shocking that he requested assistance and handcuffed Agent Hatton. However, things started to spiral out of control. It got worse when Hatton shut the car door, especially considering how hot it was in Florida. It's fortunate that Agent Hatton's condition didn't worsen because Gordon made a bad choice in doing this. Concerns were raised by Officer Gordon regarding Agent Hatton's investigation into the actions of law enforcement agencies in North Florida. Agent Hatton's claims that he was an FBI agent may not have been taken seriously by the officer because he was aware of the widespread corruption within the police department and worried about being connected to it. Let's say his ego overcame him. The hour-long incident took place on December 20 in a parking lot off U.S. Highway 98 in the coastal fishing community, 45 miles southwest of Tallahassee. Due to the heat, Agent Hatton, who was shielded from the elements by a bulletproof vest and had limited access to air conditioning, started to experience health problems like nausea and suffocation. He, however, avoided a fatal situation by being taken to a nearby hospital, where he received treatment for dehydration and heat exhaustion before being released. What do you think of our list? Do you think there are more corrupt officials out there? Sound off in the comments below. And while you are at it, make sure to hit subscribe and leave a like for more such content. Thanks for watching.
We kick things off in Texas, where members of the Lufkin PD are handcuffing 33-year-old Tasha Faye Sponsler. After being put in the police cruiser, the handcuffed Sponsler manages to undo her seatbelt. And then, despite officers being near the vehicle, she pulls off a Vegas-level magic trick by, ta-da, wiggling her one hand out of her handcuffs. Sponsler remains calm, looks around, and makes sure the officers are adequately distracted before following up her previous trick with an even crazier encore.
God dang! Hey! God. In the midst of Texas, where everyone's attention is focused on Tasha Faye Sponsler and the daring journey that she was on, the officers of the Lufkin Police Department have just finished properly handcuffing Sponsler and are about to load her into their cruiser when an unexpected event takes place. Sponsler first removes her seatbelt, which displays a remarkable level of dexterity, and then she removes her hand from the handcuffs. She makes sure to check around carefully to make sure the police are sufficiently distracted, yet despite this, she has nerves of steel. Then Sponsler plans an encore that is utterly mind-boggling to everyone and would be well at home in Las Vegas. This promises to be an exhilarating journey into a world of bold pranks and unexpected turns, and Tasha Faye Sponsler is set to star as the lead character in this episode.
As the stolen cruiser shoots back onto the main road, it narrowly misses a row of spike strips. But eventually, the chase comes to a dramatic end. After rejecting a plea deal that would have given her 16 years in prison, Sponsler got the jury trial she wanted. Unfortunately for her, after being found guilty, she was sentenced to a staggering 45 years in prison.
As the stolen cruiser drove back to the main road and narrowly skirted a series of spike strips, the officers who were after it launched into a frenzy of pursuit. The amount of stress that was being endured became increasingly severe with each passing second. The desperate circumstances that the fugitive was in caused her to make a choice that would have severe repercussions. Sponsler was offered a plea bargain that would have reduced the maximum term she faced to 16 years, but she chose to take her chances in a jury trial instead. Her run of good luck had finally come to an end. The judge came to the conclusion that she was responsible for the crime and then stunned everyone in the courtroom by imposing a sentence of 45 years in jail on her. After the spectacular chase was over, Sponsler was left with the sobering awareness that she still had a long and challenging road ahead.
It's 1:15 p.m. at the Ready Mart in Spruce Grove, Edmonton. And this man, 28-year-old Richard Parasow, has just been caught trying to buy a can of soda with a stolen credit card. Police have been called in to arrest the man, but he's not going quietly. After throwing his girlfriend, Brittany Burke, more on her in a minute, onto the officer and tangling with the store's owner, creating an impromptu game of Twister, he breaks free. He takes off towards the back of the store with no shirt and no plan. As the officer takes aim with a taser, Parasow grabs a weapon of his own, a bag of salty snacks. Realizing he's outgunned, he drops to the ground. The officer shows restraint as Brittany Burke approaches near the Pringles. After telling her to stay back, the officer calls for backup, and that's when Parasow makes at least his fourth terrible decision of the day and is pumped full of 50,000 volts. Meanwhile, with the entrance blocked by the owner, Brittany, the real star of this video, makes her move to the back of the store. Instead of trying the back door, she takes another, more daring route. After blowing absolutely any chance of anonymity right here, she crawls past the dusty Christmas decorations and heads for the ductwork and potential freedom. A seemingly good plan until it isn't. After using aisle 5 to break her fall, Burke miraculously walks away and finally decides to surrender. Backup arrives, and both Parasow and Burke are arrested. As the store's owners pick up the pieces of their ceiling, Parasow and Burke picked up 11 charges, including using a stolen credit card, resisting arrest, and assaulting a police officer.
Disarray broke out in the Spruce Grove, Edmonton location of Ready Mart around 1:15. The 28-year-old Richard Parasow was apprehended while attempting to use a fraudulent credit card to buy a Coke. When the police arrived to arrest him, he caused a commotion by throwing his girlfriend, Brittany Burke, who would turn out to be quite the character in her own right, at one of them. The shopkeeper got caught up in the confusion, and before long they had an impromptu game of Twister on their hands. Parasow stripped off his shirt and made a hasty retreat to the store's rear. Parasow dodged the officer's taser by brandishing a bag of salty snacks. Being aware of his inferiority, he wisely lowered himself to the earth. Brittany Burke, meantime, made her move, silently slinking past dusty Christmas ornaments and into the docks. In aisle 5, her audacious plot to flee backfired as she smashed through a ceiling tile. When reinforcements arrived, Parasol and Burke were arrested and the store's owners were left to pick up the pieces. Parasol was hit with a whopping 11 offenses, including theft, assault, and resisting arrest.
Taking a more straightforward approach is the alleged suspect caught on camera in this next video released by the NYPD. As she approaches the cashier at this Burger King in the Grand Concourse section of the Bronx, there seems to be nothing out of the ordinary about this customer until she dives across the counter and takes a stab at the open cash register, swiping $250. Going above and beyond the call of duty, additional staff step in. But they don't have the suspect for long. She slides across the counter and makes her way towards the door with no sense of urgency, and with good reason, as she's yet to be caught. But for the staff of this Burger King, they get a moral victory for making sure the suspect walked out both hungry and empty-handed.
When the officer from the New York Police Department approached the cashier at the Burger King located in the Grand Concourse neighborhood of the Bronx, it seemed as though the woman was merely another customer. In a sudden and unanticipated change of events, however, she leapt over the counter and made a vain attempt to get her hands on the open cash register. She accomplished an extraordinary feat for a would-be thief by stealing $250 in a single fast action, going above and beyond the call of duty for a thief. The situation was swiftly brought under control by additional members of the crew, but their efforts to capture the culprit were unsuccessful. She slid back over the counter with astonishing dexterity and then casually sauntered towards the exit, making no indication that she was in any rush. It was probably a little success for the personnel at Burger King when they made sure the suspect left the restaurant hungry and without any of his belongings.
Finally, we're in Lamar, Arkansas, where police are in pursuit of a truck and trailer reportedly stolen by the owner just 10 minutes earlier. An even bigger problem, the vehicle's owner says there's several loaded guns inside the truck. With little progress being made 10 miles into the chase, a police unit is stationed near an on-ramp, about to deploy a spike strip, hopefully disabling the vehicle.
Spikes deployed, they got him. The losing an icebox out of the back.
The spike strips are successful, sending a mini freezer flying, but the truck keeps going.
Looks like we got a front driver's side tire, 68 miles an hour, westbound.
Then, 2 miles further down the highway,
He's on the rim. He's about to come to a stop here soon. Just before the Franklin. We're pulling over on the shoulder just before Franklin County.
before the officer can get his car in park, the truck door swings open. It's the moment of truth for this pursuing officer. As the driver exits, they could be concealing a weapon, or not concealing anything at all.
Get on the ground! Get on the ground!
The driver who just led police on a dangerous high-speed chase is, in fact, a woman wearing nothing but a pair of sunglasses and who knows what on her head.
Get on the ground! Get on the ground! Get on the ground!
Police tackle the woman and place her under arrest. The suspect, later identified as 48-year-old Deidre Lewis, was charged with aggravated assault, theft, reckless driving, and fleeing.
Whew.
They had followed the track of the stolen truck and the trailer all the way to Lamar, Arkansas. 10 minutes after reporting the theft, the owner revealed a more pressing concern. He said that the stolen vehicle contained loaded firearms. Tensions were high when a police team waited at an on-ramp and got ready to use a spike strip after a 10-mile chase. Success! A small freezer was launched into the air by the strip, but the truck kept on. However, at 68 miles in, the front driver's side tire gave out, and by the time they got another 2 miles down the road, the truck was on its last legs. The cop had his opportunity to act. The truck pulled over to the side of the road in Franklin County, and as the pursuing police officer approached, the door suddenly opened. When the driver finally emerged, everyone knew for sure if she was hiding a weapon or not. The fast command came. Get on the ground. Get down here. It was then revealed that the woman behind the wheel during the high-stakes police pursuit had been wearing only sunglasses and a peculiar headpiece. Officers swarmed in and arrested the culprit, a 48-year-old woman named Deidre Lewis, who was charged with aggravated assault, theft, reckless driving, and eluding police. Ahmed Al-Manhali, a United Arab Emirates citizen, traveled to Avon, Ohio in June 2016 for medical treatment at the Cleveland Clinic. Upon arrival at the Fairland Inn and Suites, he was informed that the hotel was fully booked due to the Republican National Convention. Ahmed politely requested alternative accommodation options. While waiting in the lobby, a SWAT-style response occurred, with Avon officers arriving and detaining Ahmed, who was simply walking out of the hotel while on his phone.
On the ground, no! Get on the ground! Get on the ground! Down! On the ground! Do it now! Get on your car. Down!
Confused by the situation, Ahmed questioned the officers, but they handcuffed and searched him, damaging his phone in the process. They found a second phone, which Ahmed used for business purposes.
What the phone away! Cover the entrance, help me get back.
What is it?
Go.
What happened?
Despite no evidence of wrongdoing, the officers treated Ahmed as a terrorist, disregarding any investigation or backstory. Simultaneously, an officer spoke to the hotel receptionist who had made a 911 call, falsely claiming Ahmed had pledged allegiance to ISIS. The officer soon realized it was a false alarm and called off the search. Meanwhile, Ahmed collapsed and passed out, prompting paramedics to administer aid and to take him to a nearby hospital. The incident gained international attention, leading to the United Arab Emirates Ministry of Foreign Affairs to demand an apology from Avon officials. The mayor and police chief apologized to Ahmed, emphasizing that the incident did not reflect their community's values. Marriott International, the hotel's owner, expressed regret and committed to training to prevent similar occurrences.
You should not have been put in that situation like you were.
There were some false accusations made against you, and those are regrettable.
Ahmed filed a
Jensen
lawsuit
said in a
against the
statement,
hotel and its
"This
front
was a
desk
very
employees, citing
unfortunate
racial
incident
profiling."
and does not
While the
reflect
police
our
department
community.
initially considered charges
Avon is
against the
proud to
911
welcome
caller,
visitors from the
a
United
grand
Arab
jury declined to
Emirates
indict
and
anyone
other
after reviewing
countries
the
who
evidence.
regularly
After
come
3
to
years of their
Northern
litigation,
Ohio for
Ahmed settled the
tourism,
lawsuit
business,
for an
medical
undisclosed
care,
amount.
or education.
The settlement aimed to compensate Ahmed for physical, psychological, and financial damages. However, he still faced lasting emotional distress, was haunted by the officer's eyes, and experienced sleep disturbances. The incident highlighted the need for improved cultural understanding and sensitivity among law enforcement personnel. Here we have Brian Filipiak, a 47-year-old Washtenaw County Sheriff's Lieutenant, who was off duty when he got pulled over. Deputy Morrison, after stopping Lieutenant Filipiak, informed him about the reason for the traffic stop. Subsequently, Deputy Morrison inquired if Lieutenant Filipiak had consumed any alcoholic beverages that afternoon. In response, Lieutenant Filipiak acknowledged that he had indeed consumed a couple drinks. After Deputy Morrison confirmed Lieutenant Filipiak's identity, he returned to his vehicle and instructed the lieutenant to exit the truck for a field sobriety test. The purpose of the test was to assess whether Lieutenant Filipiak had consumed an excessive amount of alcohol, despite it being evident he was clearly unfit to drive. Exhibiting evident signs of severe intoxication, such as slurred speech and watery eyes, Lieutenant Filipiak left no room for doubt that he was heavily under the influence.
Okay. You got your ID?
However, despite this clear indication, Lieutenant Filipiak adamantly refused to comply with Deputy Morrison's request to step out of the vehicle. Instead, he insisted that Deputy Morrison should either allow him to return home or let him sleep it off on the side of the road. In response, Deputy Morrison firmly informed Lieutenant Filipiak that his options were limited and made it clear that he would not allow him to be released in his current condition.
Multiple reckless driving calls about you. Okay. And then when I'm calling you, you're hitting the shoulder of the road. You been drinking?
Okay.
How many?
Just a couple.
Okay. Where are you reaching in the back for? I seen you reaching in the back. You have an open container back there? Okay, you been drinking on the way here? Got your registration, proof of insurance? Do you have a firearm on you? Okay. Do you got your pistol? Are you a corrections officer or just deputy? Lieutenant? Okay.
Despite Deputy Morrison's persistent attempts to persuade Lieutenant Filipiak to exit the vehicle, the latter remained adamant in his repeated request to be released. He proceeded to assert that Deputy Morrison's job would not be jeopardized if he let the situation slide, emphasizing the potential consequences for himself if the matter were pursued.
Brian, I'm going to have you step out of the car. I'm going to do a field sobriety test for you. Okay?
However, Deputy Morrison understood that ignoring the incident would not only lead to his termination, but also result in misdemeanor charges carrying a penalty of up to 1 year of imprisonment or a fine of $1,000. Deputy Morrison was fully aware of the extent of Lieutenant Filipiak's intoxication, as he had allegedly observed the lieutenant discarding open containers in the back seat during the traffic stop.
I'm going to ask you to step out of the vehicle. What would you like me to do?
Just let me.
I can't. I had multiple phone calls. You'd be in the same situation if I was in the vehicle in your county, correct?
All right, just let me stay here then.
You can't. I'm going to ask you nicely to step out of this vehicle. Brian, my hands are tied. If I let you go, I'm going to lose my career over you. You don't think I wouldn't?
No.
This is northern Michigan. We're a small department. Okay, I'm going to ask you nicely to step out of the vehicle. You know I have my job to do. You know that.
Yeah, I just want you.
And I understand your point, your position. Okay, I'm trying to be as cooperative and nice to you as I can.
Despite Deputy Morrison's continuous efforts in trying to have Lieutenant Filipiak step out of the vehicle,
After nearly 5 minutes of persistent requests for Lieutenant Filipiak to exit the vehicle,
Just let me go.
I can't let you go. We're way past that point. You know this. You're a lieutenant. You know how this works.
Yeah, I do.
You would tell one of your deputies if they called you right on the side of the road and they asked you what to do. So, if one of your deputies is in the position as I am right now, calling you as a lieutenant, Lieutenant, this is what I got. What should I do? You're just going to say, let him go? Why? Just because. You're intoxicated. I know it. You've opened alcohol in the vehicle that you have back. I know it. You know it. You're a good guy. Ryan, out of this vehicle. I'm asking you nicely. I don't want to see anything worse happen. Okay?
No.
Deputy Morrison, having reached the limits of his patience, opened the door and firmly instructed the lieutenant to step out, avoiding any need for further escalation. Deputy Morrison proceeded to inform Lieutenant Filipiak that he would be arrested for refusal to comply if he persisted in refusing to exit the vehicle. RNO, an abbreviation for resisting and obstructing a police officer, is a felony offense that carries a penalty of up to 2 years of imprisonment, a fine of $2,000, or both. After an additional 5 minutes had passed, Deputy Morrison cautioned Lieutenant Filipiak that he would be tased if he continued to resist compliance with his instructions. Consequently, Deputy Morrison retrieved his taser and aimed it at the lieutenant, while firmly warning him that failure to comply would result in being tased. Deputy Morrison even considered using the backup taser at that moment. In this situation, Deputy Morrison possessed the authority to employ his taser and would not have faced repercussions for doing so. Fortunately, the threat of being tased successfully persuaded Lieutenant Filipiak to finally exit the vehicle. As anticipated, Deputy Morrison did not tolerate Lieutenant Filipiak's resistance, instructed Lieutenant Filipiak to occupy the back seat of his patrol car, intending to transport him to the police station. Despite Deputy Morrison's clear directive to sit in the car, Lieutenant Filipiak persisted in his refusal, stating, "I am who you guys are. Do you guys realize that?" This remark strongly indicated that Lieutenant Filipiak was attempting to exploit his position of authority, seeking a preferential treatment based on his status.
All right, we're done with this.
Hold on.
Talk to me. Yes or no? Are you doing field sobriety tests?
All right, so if this was the other situation.
Lieutenant Filipiak clearly held the belief that he was exempt from abiding by the law. However, the officers present at the scene were determined to make it evident that such was not the case. Following some further struggle, they managed to successfully place Lieutenant Filipiak inside the patrol car.
I'm not resisting, but let's stop.
You're tensed up.
Let's talk about it. Okay.
We've talked. I don't want to put you on the ground.
No,
I don't want to make this worse.
All right, I will just sleep it off.
Dude, stop it right now. You know, stop it.
allowing for his transportation to the police station where he would face the consequences of his actions. Subsequent breath tests conducted at the police station revealed that Filipiak's blood alcohol level registered at 0.28 and 0.27%. For context, the legal limit for operating a motor vehicle in the United States is a mere 0.08%.
What happens? We're going to take you to the jail and ask for a data master. And if you refuse that, we're going to get a search warrant for your blood. Brian, have a seat.
Stop, guys. Hold on.
Therefore, Lieutenant Filipiak's blood alcohol concentration was over 3 times the legal limit, subjecting him to Michigan State's super drunk law, which carries penalties of up to 180 days in jail, fines of up to $700, and up to 360 hours of community service. So it's time to watch our next case. On July 26, 2021, the Orangeburg Department of Public Safety received a distress call from a female resident of Colton Village Townhomes in Orangeburg, South Carolina. The caller reported that a man was vigorously banging on her door and window, attempting to gain entry. Furthermore, she alleged that the man possessed a firearm tucked into the waistband of his jean shorts. In response, dispatch promptly directed all officers in the vicinity to respond without delay. Officer David Lance Dukes arrived as the first responder at the scene. With his firearm drawn, Officer Dukes exited his patrol car and proceeded to instruct a 58-year-old disabled man, along with his cousin DeMario Julian, to immediately lie on the ground. At this juncture, it was evident from the body camera footage that Mr. Gillard was complying with Officer Dukes' commands. The recording captured Mr. Gillard raising his hands in the air and proceeding to lower himself onto his hands and knees as directed by the officer. However, before Mr. Gillard could fully assume the prone position on the ground, Officer Dukes unexpectedly and forcefully stomped on Mr. Gillard's neck. The impact caused Mr. Gillard's head to forcefully strike the pavement, resulting in a bruised forehead. Subsequent investigations revealed that Mr. Gillard's delay in complying was due to the presence of metal rods and pins in his leg and hip as a result of a previous injury. Following the aggressive act, Officer Dukes promptly restrained Mr. Gillard by placing him in handcuffs. Immediately afterward, Officer Dukes informed a second officer at the scene that there should be a gun behind Mr. Gillard, suggesting that Mr. Gillard had allegedly left a firearm behind the white SUV where he had been positioned prior to the confrontation.
There's a gun behind me. There's a gun, I believe, behind me.
I ain't got no gun there.
Mr. Gillard assured Officer Dukes that there was no gun present, and upon a quick examination, the second officer confirmed the absence of any firearm. Officer Dukes proceeded to conduct a search of Mr. Gillard's person, accusing him of failing to comply with orders. However, as evident in the earlier body camera footage, Mr. Gillard had been complying with Officer Dukes' commands from the beginning. Not once did Mr. Gillard exhibit any behavior that could be perceived as a threat, thereby negating Officer Dukes' justification for excusing excessive force against him. Once Officer Dukes ensured that Mr. Gillard did not possess a firearm, he decided to search the vicinity of the SUV himself in hopes of locating the alleged weapon. It swiftly became apparent that there was no gun to be found. Instead, it was discovered that Mr. Gillard had been carrying a stick wrapped in shiny silver tape, which he typically used as protection against aggressive stray dogs. Officer Dukes and the second officer helped Mr. Gillard back up onto his feet, at which point he began expressing his dissatisfaction regarding the unnecessary impact of his head on the concrete. The visible injury to Mr. Gillard's forehead, marked by a bruise and swelling, further supported his claim. In response to Mr. Gillard's confrontation regarding the incident, Officer Dukes provided a reply. At this point, it became apparent that Mr. Gillard was in need of medical attention. However, neither of the officers present on the scene initially took this into consideration. Fortunately, Officer Queenie Polidor arrived and promptly recognized the necessity for emergency medical services, requesting EMS assistance. As Mr. Gillard continued to express his grievances regarding the incident, Officer Dukes approached Officer Polidor and another responding officer to inform them about the situation. However, Officer Dukes' account was far from truthful. He claimed that when Mr. Gillard walked in front of the SUV, he believed Mr. Gillard was carrying a gun and repeatedly instructed him to drop it. Officer Dukes made further allegations claiming Mr. Gillard had his hands in his pockets and repeatedly ignored requests to show his hands. However, the body camera footage once again contradicted Officer Dukes' statements.
He was in front of the car when I came up, and he was walking like this. And I thought it was a gun at first. I said, drop the gun, drop the gun, drop the gun, drop the gun. I had him at gunpoint.
Clearly showing Mr. Gillard complying with the orders by keeping his hands raised above his head. Officer Dukes mentioned to a fellow officer that he wanted to take the stick as evidence, stating that it was the reason for his actions. In response, the fellow officer promptly questioned the necessity of using the stick as evidence, pointing out that the body camera footage would suffice. EMS arrived at the scene to attend to Mr. Gallard's condition. While Mr. Gallard was being examined, Mr. Julian approached Officer Dukes and requested a card with his details on it. In response, Officer Dukes promptly informed Mr. Julian that he did not possess a card and clarified that the department did not issue such cards in any case. Officer Polidor quickly recognized Officer Duke's misstatement and promptly corrected him. She asserted that they indeed possessed cards and proceeded to provide Mr. Julian with her own cards as requested. On July 31, 2022, the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division announced that Officer Dukes was taken into custody and charged with first-degree assault and battery. Several months later, in November 2021, Mr. Gallard received a compensation settlement of $650,000 from Orangeburg, South Carolina. City officials additionally expressed their commitment to establishing a citizens task force to provide oversight and guidance regarding interactions between residents and the Orangeburg police.